OCM the CAA, Schant not going to squeak to Nitsen, Homasquium, Ama High Fleekton, Eat, Selena August, Tennessee Lash, I Quinishqualowens, Quincy, Quitsnala, Sana, Whale. That's the language of the land, of the ancestors of the land, of my ancestors, of the ones who are in my bones and in my blood and in my heart and in my thoughts and prayers. The downriver Huntgaminum speaking people, Musqueam's one of them. I said in Huntgaminum, welcome to the unceded lands of the Huntgaminum speaking people. My name is Not. I am from Musqueam. I am the granddaughter of the late Stephen and Selena August, and it gives me feelings of great joy to be here with you. And as many times as I say that, and as many times as people have heard that, and I am so happy to have you here, Samantha, each of you. Those words mean so much to me every time I say them, to know that work is being done in good ways. Work is being done in ways to honor the land and to honor the people, wherever that work is happening. It fills my heart. And like, we don't have an exact English translation for Ike Gwinishqualowens. It means essentially like there's feelings of joy in me. For each of you to also be taking this time to consider your own ancestors, to consider your own roots, and to be inviting them into this space as well. Because historically, communities coming together, as has happened with the Japanese and the Indigenous communities here in what's now known as Vancouver, is a huge part of how each of our communities survived. We know the hardships our communities have faced, and I love that we're also spotlighting what makes us beautiful and what makes us powerful, and bringing together and pooling together resources and networks and different kinds of support that we can be putting in place with each other. And I raise my hands to the Japanese community for consistently turning up, for consistently leading the way, not just with conversation, but with actions. Seeing you at, Kathy, at not this Wednesday, last Wednesday, when the youth were at Hastings and Clark, knowing that there is more security and more safety for the youth that are making these really brave stands, and knowing that our communities are still coming together when there are no spotlights and when it's just time for the work. And I personally am always humbled and grateful, and I look forward to being able to stand with the Japanese community, and knowing that since my dad was a little boy, and maybe I've shared this before with a few of you, my dad and his family, my dad's father uprooted their family in 1957 when my dad was about 6 years old, and took them from their beautiful home and land in Warwickshire, England. That was my dad's mother's ancestral properties. And they landed in Gander, Newfoundland, and then they went and lived outside of Toronto in poverty and really harsh environment and violence within the family. And they were here in Vancouver by the time my dad was 8. So as a young boy in a very dysfunctional household where the kids were often left on their own, and it was a really hard life that my dad had since he was very little. And when he would wander the streets of Vancouver, just exploring and just being like a brave, curious little boy at 8 years old, he, I think it was in school and in his wanderings, happened upon some of the Japanese kids that were his age, and they started bringing him home to their families. And at 8 years old, they started to teach my dad the series of like judo and different exercises that now my dad just turned 70. My dad for 62 years has done the exercises that were shared with him to keep his mind and body and spirit in balance and in a healthy way. And they made sure that my dad was fed. They made sure that my dad had safe places to be. And for a boy who couldn't have that at home and didn't know maybe that that was even possible, that it was normal for other people. My dad has always talked of and shared, talked of so highly and shared such love and gratitude for the Japanese community. He's never said the names of the families. I would love to know which families they were, who essentially took him in and cared for a little boy whose own family wasn't able to care for him. So for that continuation to carry on through me, his daughter, to be able to work with each of you, to represent for my ancestors, to walk with you and your ancestors. I think that is what is at the heart of this workshop, of these series of workshops, of all of the work that we have done together. For me, that is what's at the heart of it. And I raise my hands to lift you up, to recognize you, and to say, St'at'imc for loving us and for taking care of us and for making space for us and for being kind and gentle with us when all too often others were not kind and gentle and careful with you. And I know we understand each other's trauma, but I think maybe equally, maybe more, we understand each other's triumphs, our successes, our rising. Like the teaching about the lotus, no mud, no lotus. Well, I think we're all going to be some beautiful lotus flowers because we've had a lot of mud to root ourselves into and to try to pull nutrients and out of, and to create a beautiful lotus. And in my mind, I've often pictured a lotus flower with beautiful West Coast drawings in it. And I feel like that's what we are. So I really thank you from the bottom of my heart and on behalf of my dad and my ancestors that I represent, for being here, for standing up, for leading the way, for demonstrating through actions what loving and what solidarity looks like. This is a song that I'm going to wrap up with, a song that came to me. It was 8 years ago. We stood to protect our ancestors under, right beside the Arthur Lang on-ramp in Marpole. And Japanese community came and stood with us then and there. And before all that happened, I started to hear, when I was in the shower, I started to hear people singing, and I thought, oh Lord, I'm losing my mind at first. And then I realized, like, I felt calmed by the singing. I felt like everything in my body was calming down, like I could breathe, like my mind wasn't racing, like I didn't have the jangly feeling that often accompanies the anxious feelings. And over time, the song has stayed in my head. And maybe a year ago, I started recording the songs that I hear, and realizing that these are songs that are coming to me to be sung, but I'm also looking for the purpose of each song and asking for that, and that the songs come to me when I'm in the shower. It makes perfect sense once I heard the teaching that before, when we would be by the water, when we would be at the river, when we would be at the ocean, that's when the songs would come to us. And I don't get to the river or the ocean the way that we used to. So, but I'm definitely by the water in the shower each day. So it reminds me of the ingenuity and the absolute brilliance of our ancestors to connect dots in ways that help us to open our minds as well. This song is, if you want to close your eyes, if you want to just plant yourselves sitting upright, relax your knees and relax your hips, relax your shoulders, feel your head resting gently on your neck, relax your eyebrows, drop the tongue from the roof of your mouth, and have a slow, steady inhale. And as you exhale, invite in your ancestors, talk to them, call them in. And if you have a place that you go to, if it's the trees, if it's the moss, if it's a lake, if it's a temple, if it's your granny's kitchen, invite your senses to take you to that space. And this song is to honor those spaces. It's to honor the work that happens in those sacred spaces. You want to slowly feel yourselves grounding in your bodies again. Let this feeling of rest, of comfort, of safety, of connectedness stay in your body. And as you're ready, open your eyes. I raise my hands and I say, hi, Tzapka, for inviting me, for including me, for making it a safe space. And I'm really looking forward to the work that is going to be done here. And yay, I'm so happy that that was helpful, Trish. And whenever you need, in the blink of an eye, that minute, that like fraction of a minute, though that fraction of a second it takes to blink your eye, just tell your mind, take me back there, and it'll bring you back to this place, to this feeling. With a little bit of practice, literally in the blink of an eye, you can come back to this feeling. And I'm wishing you all a great day and safe travels, and raising my hands to the organizers who made today possible and to the people who are coming to participate as well. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much, Audrey. We are so grateful that you were able to join us today. Thank you for opening our session. I think that was an amazing way to open. That song really made me feel a lot calmer. So thank you.
Yay!
And your words were so powerful. So
you
really helped set a perfect tone for this workshop today.
Yay! Well, I'm happy. I can leave a little bit of me in there while I go find this isn't Haida Gwaii behind me, but we're heading out to, I don't know which direction, to find a version of this. And I'm gonna go run and play.
Yes, you go spend the rest of your day out in nature with the trees.
Yeah. Yes,
Thank
exactly.
you, Audrey.
Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you. So yes, hello everyone. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is the second session of the Greater Vancouver Japanese Canadian Citizen Association's Anti-Racism series, Indigenous Issues and Solidarity. My name is Emiko Newman. I am the workshop coordinator for this series. I am so glad to see a lot of familiar faces from Anti-Racism 101 last month, but also a lot of new people here as well. So thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to pass it over right away to Judy Hanazawa, who is the president of the GVJCCA, to say a few words.
Hi, everybody. And I'm again acknowledging with gratitude that we're proceeding with this event on the traditional territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people. And I sincerely thank Audrey for her amazing words of welcome and her acknowledgement that we are proceeding with our event today on this land of the people. And good afternoon. We're really happy today to have Norm Leech, who's today's speaker. And again, I'm thanking the National Association of Japanese Canadians for their funding support for this event. I'm so glad you have shown up and look forward to being with you as you participate in our program. And thank you very much all for being here. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. So Kathy, you can stop recording. I think you on where Norm is coming to us from. He has been the executive director for the Vancouver Aboriginal Community Policing Center since 2016. He is a frequent speaker, facilitator, and storyteller, sharing the experiences of Indigenous peoples in Canada. Norm talks about the Indigenous worldview and Indigenous relations to genders, the written word, and the land. He is trained in facilitation with the Canadian Human Rights Foundation, now known as Equitas, and with St'at'imc Restorative Justice in Lillooet. So Norm, we are so pleased to have you with us today.
Thank you so much, Nico, and everybody in the committee. Thrilled to have the opportunity to speak. I shared my expectation and hope for today, which is to gain friends and allies and fellow warriors for justice in the many fights for justice. I imagine you all show up here on a Saturday because you feel a sense of purpose to do good work. And I think that's something that brings us together, and that's fantastic. I honor that, and I thank you. I usually do a land acknowledgement in a little different way, and I acknowledge the land first, the land that was here first for millions of years, maybe even billions, and is our oldest ancestor, who has provided us every cell, every molecule, every atom of our bodies since before the beginning, since before we were humans. For the dinosaurs as well, our other relatives. So the land is our greatest grandmother, because she has given all, sustained, nourished, sheltered, everything, every medicine, every drop of water, every molecule that we've ever had has come from her. And so we need to acknowledge that, and that's the relationship that we have with her. And if you think of that, someone who gives without condition, without limit, without interruption, without anything, forever, that is essentially the definition of love. So we know that our land loves us. This picture is behind me is the view from our community. I'm from Lillooet, which is surrounds the town of Lillooet. So my ancestors lived there for thousands of years and fished there and lived there and died there forever. So when we say we are the land, it's literally true. And I'll also say that I'm going to try and give you a real crash course in indigeneity. Who here is Indigenous? Put up your hand. You're all wrong. You're all Indigenous to somewhere. Maybe not here, but you are Indigenous to somewhere. Your family came up out of land somewhere where they had lived for thousands of years, and they have that relationship with that land there somewhere. And nothing says that they cannot transplant that feeling to another piece of land, because all the land is connected anyways, one planet. Who here is colonized? Put up your hands. Okay, maybe the other way. Anyone here not colonized? I don't see any hands up. Good. You agree then that we've all been colonized. And colonization is about more than just land. Land is a big part of it. Like that's what we feel the harshest because our lands are being harmed. But it's about ideas. It's the colonization of ideas that came with the explorers, with the new settlers, with the new people, with the new laws. That's the biggest, most harmful, most traumatic aspect of colonization. So, you know, I say that we've been here for 15,000 years because there's archaeological evidence, and I get less argument. If I go older than that, I get arguments. So 15,000 years is kind of indisputable. And in Canada's really only been here barely 150 years, which is 1% of that, right? 150 is 1/100th of 15,000. So our history has been very recent. Of colonization, and the most recently colonized people are here. Like this river behind me, this picture, that's the Fraser River, which we named thousands and thousands of years something else, but it got renamed by some guy named Simon Fraser, who came down this river, and he was the first white person come down this river in 1808 is when he landed in Lillooet, which is barely 200 years ago, which was our first contact. So we're very recently colonized. We have not accepted it. We have not, well, we've never agreed with it, but we're rejecting it. And that's what decolonization is for us. Reconciliation is a meaningless concept for us. And even at the Community Policing Center, we've abandoned the discussions about reconciliation because it's not compatible. The worldviews are just too different. This one, the colonized worldview, does not make sense to us at all. Some of you, the people who were in the small group, talked about going to Haida Gwaii or going to other communities, and also knowing that there's so much diversity across the First Nations communities across the country and the continent, and both continents. But there are commonalities. And some of the biggest ones are plain and simple, our connectedness to land. And connectedness to land depends on a couple of other things too. Because it depends on, well, understanding how colonized we are. And that's still a process for all of us, especially because we're speaking in this colonized language. This language doesn't say things that we have in our language. And in your languages, this colonized language is about property and power and control and ownership and legalities. And it's not about relationship. And it's not about love. So our experience with colonization has been horrible. And we have heard about, someone mentioned smallpox. And that was one pandemic that we survived. One of many, like that was just one. So there were dozens of different pandemics that swept across the continent before the explorers arrived, because the diseases spread faster than the explorers could travel. So, 200 years before Simon Fraser arrived, we'd survived many, many, many plagues. Smallpox was just one, chickenpox, measles, mumps, rubella. The flu killed us, the cold killed us. There's been modern ones, HIV, AIDS, diabetes, COVID, all took a toll on our communities so that we were almost exterminated. So when we talk about genocide, we understand genocide. Now, we also understand trauma, because that was sort of the biggest legacy of colonization for us, was multiple complex traumas. A residential school was a huge one, but that's just one. The diseases is another. The reserve systems is another. The Indian Act is another. All of them traumas. The many, many laws that were written against us is another. The written legal systems are a powerful, powerful tool of colonization, right? because all those injustices that occurred against Indigenous people in this country, the reserve systems, the Indian Act, the residential schools, they were all legal. They were all, in fact, the law. So, you know, when we talk with elders about their experiences in residential school and the horrible, horrible atrocities that were committed against them as children. And I talk to police about this, all police recruits we give a presentation to. And I tell them, we know that every single family, Indigenous family in this country, has those memories and experiences in their family history. Every single one. And the reason we know it's every single one is because it was the law. And that law was enforced. And it was enforced by people in uniforms just like the ones you wear today. And they look exactly the same. And your job descriptions were written 200 years ago. And you're still doing that job perfectly right, perfectly well, just as you were originally intended and designed to do, to enforce those laws against us. So we were here for 15,000 years, and those laws were only written 200 years ago. And they were written specifically to overcome the obstacles and impediments and to colonization, which is us. Now, when I talk about our history of colonization and the things that we survived, I ask each of you, like many of you put up your hands when I asked if you're colonized. So you only have to go back a few more generations than me to find your family experiences with colonization, whether the colonized or the colonizers. Both experiences are traumatic. So all of you, almost just as much as us, have intergenerational trauma due to colonization. So that we share. Now, colonization, as I said, brings a lot of other stuff with it. Often there's war. So there's the intergenerational trauma due to war. And if you go back in your family histories, there's war, right? Human history is full of these traumatic events, just like pandemic, right? This is not the first pandemic our family histories have had to survive. This one is nothing compared to the other ones. At least we have, you know, resources and knowledge and pharmaceutical companies to deal with this one. But so in that way, when I say that we are survivors, so are you, okay? And from our perspective, it's easy for us to say, to place the blame of all these troubles, these traumas at the feet of colonization. It may be a little harder for you to make that connection. Now, we spent time trying to figure out what's the difference. What makes these colonized way of thinking so take root and so prevalent and so pervasive and so effective? And it comes down to this sense of connectedness. We know that we are connected to everything. When we grew up in our lands, we know, we have a sense of how this mountain is today, how that river is today, how our neighbors on the other side of that mountain are today. We know that sense. Now, that depends on rejecting the notion that you only have 5 senses. Can you agree that you probably have more than 5 senses? Because colonized thinking and teaching says you only have 5 senses. And anything beyond that is fake, or it's mumbo jumbo, or it's mystical, or it's deniable. Personally, traditionally, historically, most humans know and believe that there are more than 5. So if you can, then understand that you have a sense of connection. And I think we can demonstrate that in this circle. Just the fact that we all arrived at this circle, I think demonstrates that. So that sense is not the same in a colonized worldview. In a colonized philosophy, it tends to begin in the statement, I think, therefore I am. That's an individual philosophy that separates the individual from everyone else and everything else. We don't understand that. That makes zero sense to us. In that universe, everybody is alone. And to us, that's a terrifying universe, not worth living in. The most terrible punishment we can think of to mete out to anybody for the most heinous, unforgivable acts is banishment, which is to make someone alone. I can't imagine that. But it also explains why the fastest growing mental health issue in cities worldwide is loneliness. How has humanity come to this? It's that disconnection from everything. And the answer to us is connection, to reconnect, to feel the connection, to accept it, to grow it, to get closer to it. That's the Indigenous worldview. But it also means not just people. I was sharing in a small group that, yeah, I'm trained as a human rights trainer. I train other trainers. I'm trained to do that, but I can't. In the human rights paradigm, and you have to recognize that the United Nations and human rights per se is a colonized construct. And the way we know that, because in that system of human rights, only humans have rights. And that's a big problem for us, because that puts humans up here and everything else down here. And that's a reflection of that individualized, separated, isolated worldview. Now, what other things come with that? Well, once you separate yourself and you give yourself rights, then and you also give yourself the power to write laws that you can impose on other people. You have the right to turn things and treat things like property. The land is not a relative or an ancestor any longer, it's property. And then the trees are property, and then the river's property, and then animals are property. And it didn't take long until women became property, and children became property, and people of other colors became property. And to us, those are, again, all consequences and effects of a colonized worldview, because we didn't have those. To us, it's about relationships and preserving and maintaining the balance of the relationships, and not just people with the salmon, with the trees, with the mountain, with the river, with the sun and the moon and the stars. And I also believe that all humans who came up out of the land, right, because we all did, like we all spent thousands of years in a place where we understood that place and had that relationship with those lands. We understood those things. It was only later when we started writing down laws and imposing them on each other. Oh, are you keeping an eye on the time for me, Emmy? Because I'll go on all day. So those are sort of the basis, the fundamental premises that colonization is based on, that are different from an indigenized worldview that we don't understand, because that individualized, separated way allows things like for me to say, you know, it's in my interest alone to collect all the food and keep it from you and sell it to you, because then I can win and you can lose. And that's only arises from a separated, isolated, individualized view of the world, of the universe. But we didn't have that, and it doesn't make sense to us. The only acceptable reason for us to accumulate wealth was so that we could give it all away. And that's the potlatch. And that's our understanding. And it took me a long time to figure this out. Speaking with Americans who were in Costa Rica when I was there, and I met them, and they were there. I was there to visit a friend, but they were there to do the ayahuasca ceremony. And they had been there hundreds of times to do this plant medicine. And I was asking, and I was so curious as to why. And he says, because I feel this connection to nature. And then it dawned on me, you don't feel it all the time. We feel it every second of every day. We are just always connected to it. It never goes away for us, but you lost it. And you're willing to pay $1,000 a trip to go down to Costa Rica and feel it for 2 hours. Oh my God, I get it. That's what's wrong with you. Yeah. And then I came home and did more ceremony with more elders, and that's when I learned what our relationship with the land loves us, because we are its grandchildren. And I learned this from the Circle of Grandmothers of the Downtown East Side. And their motto is, everybody needs more grandmother love. And they learned it from their grandmothers, and they learned it from their grandmothers. And there's nothing better than having a grandmother hold you in her arms, on her lap, and tell you you're awesome, you're wonderful, and everything's gonna be okay. And really that's what our land gives us. And we still feel that, and it never went away for us. Now, if we can rekindle that sense that colonization has told you you don't have and isn't real in everybody, then we cannot treat our grandmother this way any longer. And if we all feel that, then we can all learn to be good human beings, good, responsible human beings living in these lands according to the original laws that these lands taught us. And if you want to know what those laws are, then you got to ask the people who've lived there the longest, because they're the ones who know. Okay. So let's all do that.
Thank you, Norm. I would like to listen to you for probably 2 more hours. Yeah, I was trying to take notes and trying to listen, and
I think it's being transcribed, isn't it?
It is being recorded, and I will definitely watch that over later. Thank you so much. Really, it was so powerful, and everyone has a lot that we can learn from you. So thank you. I want to give everyone a break now. We're about halfway through the session, so we can take 5 minutes. And if anyone has questions or comments for Norm, please do feel free to put them in the chat, and we can hopefully get to them at the end. So we'll take 5 minutes, and then we'll come back and we'll go back into the breakout rooms again. So see you soon.